Hi, my name is Chris Santos, and I'm going to do a quick demo of a blueprint actor that I made for Studio Point Blank, which was a cinematics project that I worked on in the final semester of my graduate program. This tool is a pipe generator, so it makes networks of pipes in rigid perpendicular formations using a spline as controls. So rather than spline meshes where they kind of curve like spaghetti, this is what it looks like. It creates things at 90-degree angles only, which is fitting for the look we were going for our environment. So the way it works is you first drag in one of these pipe spline actors into the scene, and then the way this works is it's made using Unreal's procedural content generation framework. And so this pipe has a PCG component on it. If we click on that, we can see that we have some settings here, and we can also select what pipe graph we want to use. If we're adding a new type of pipe mesh that we're creating, we can fill out these settings from scratch. But I have some that I've set up already as PCG graph instances. So if I select this big pipe right here and I start dragging out the spline handle here, it will start generating pipes going along the spline. And if I make a bend in the spline, the pipe will spawn a corner piece and move accordingly. So you can kind of make all sorts of different formations with this. It'll even still spawn pipe if you do something crazy like that, although you won't have as precise control. And the pipe will rotate with the actor as well. So the pipe has several different settings that you can mess with. First, I should explain how it works actually, is behind the scenes, what is happening is PCG system is spawning points along the spline. I actually have a debug setting I can turn on here so that you can see that. And yes, these are points that the PCG graph is generating along the spline. And then once these points are generated, it will start generating the pipe pieces. And so it'll start out at the beginning of the spline, and it will say, are we close enough to the next PCG point yet? If so, we can start comparing against the second PCG point. If not, then we spawn a pipe, and then we check again, are we close enough? If not, keep spawning pipes until we are close enough to the next PCG point we're comparing against, and then move to the next one, etc., etc. And if the pipe is changing directions, so like you need to go around a corner here, it'll spawn a corner piece facing in the right direction and continue onward. So the settings here are maximum number of pipes. This is mainly useful as a failsafe to prevent infinite loops, because there are some configurations of the pipe spline where the pipe might not be able to reach the points properly, and it'll keep spawning pipes infinitely, so this is a good failsafe against that. That might happen if like these pipes are pretty big, so if you had this spline really tiny and bunched up, the pipes would actually be like just circling around the points, unable to reach them. So that prevents that. Of course, you can select what meshes you want to use here for the straight pieces and the corner pieces. The offset value here is basically saying how far apart should each of these pipes be spawned. So in this case, for the big pipe, it's the distance between each of the center points of each segment of pipe, because that is where the origin on the mesh is. And then these location and rotation offsets are for if the mesh is not properly rotated by default to align with the direction of the spline. So you see here in the preview, this straight pipe is going up and down without using the rotation and location offset. This is what it looks like when it tries to spawn the pipe. So transform is applied to these straight pipe pieces to rotate them 90 degrees to the side. So you get a result like this. And there's similar settings for the corner piece. And then there's these settings for use offset after corner right here. What this is for meshes where the origin is not in the center. You'll see here there's an issue with this smaller pipe mesh where after a corner piece is placed, it is actually spawning kind of to the side and further away from the corner piece, and it's not lining up. The reason is because this mesh has the origin at the end, whereas this one has it in the center. Same for the corner pieces. Ideally, when your team is making these assets, you want to make sure that the origins of the meshes are in the correct place or edit them to be in the correct place. But these are asset packs, so maybe you don't have control over that. If you do have the origin at a different spot, you can fix that issue with these offset settings. And then we have the accuracy value. What this is basically how close each pipe tries to get to the next spline point before saying, okay, let's compare against the following spline point. So the higher this number is, the less accurate it will try to be. Oh, that's 1,000, so I actually went down. So it's trying to conform to the pipe more tightly. That's when you get some of this behavior where it almost like starts to kind of wrap around the spline here. And then, yes, if it's more loose, you can see now it's not really conforming to the shape of the spline as much. So that's what that value does. And we have the debug points setting that I showed here earlier. And lastly, we have the spline sampling settings. This is basically controlling how the spline, the PCG points, are generated along the spline. By default, it's distance-based, so every 600 units along the spline, it spawns another PCG point. But let's say you want really precise control of where the spline is going, and you want to use the spline handles here as the destinations for the pipe. So like if you wanted every corner piece to spawn at one of these handles, for instance, what you would want to do is go into those sampling settings and switch to subdivision. And that makes it so that a point is spawning at each of these spline handles. And in this case, it's subdivision of 1, so there's also 1 halfway between those two. You could make it 0, and so there's only points that it's going towards at each spline handle. Basically, there's options to mess around because the settings work best for different levels of precision you want, and depending on which mesh you're using, the size of the mesh and the origin. Once you mess around with the settings and get it just right for whatever you're doing, you can take your PCG instance and save it here. And that's where I got like the pre-made small pipe and big pipe graph instances. So the tool is pretty straightforward to use after the settings are set up. I wanted the rigid pipes because I thought the spaghetti kind of pipes, if you were using spline meshes and that followed the spline exactly, wouldn't be realistic for what we were going for. Our scene is kind of set in like an industrial factory setting, but I liked the kind of intuitiveness and ease of use of the spline as a control. So I used the PCG system to make this actor that is the best of both worlds. And this was used by our set dressers to create that factory scene, and it worked out well.